The ASQ-1 is a performance-orientated sequencer designed for fun and immediate sequencing of an entire system. It includes 2 step-time SH-101 style CV gate sequencers, a quantiser, and 4 drum machine style trigger pattern sequencers. Programming all of the modes is performed using the large mechanical note keys for a tactile sequencing experience that welcomes improvisation and rewards muscle memory. Let's take a look at its basic operation. When no external clock is patched, the ASQ-1 will generate its own internal clock. To set the BPM in increments of 1, hold play and increase or decrease the tempo with the octave buttons. The ASQ-1 is primarily intended to be clocked externally from a master clock like the Pamela's new workout. This allows the sequencer to be paused and provides finer control and flexibility. Let's set up a clock and a reset using channels 1 and 2 of PAM. We'll set the clock to ×4 and create a reset using the trigger on stop modifier. After the clock and reset signals are patched, pressing play on the ASQ-1 will ready the sequencers to start advancing once PAM's clock begins to run. Stopping PAM will reset all the sequencers to step 1. At any time, the currently selected mode of the ASQ-1 will be reflected and controlled by its buttons and the note keys. Pressing mode steps forward through the sequencer modes in order. To select a specific mode, hold the mode button and navigate back and forth using the octave buttons. To disable or mute the currently selected mode, hold the hold button and press rest. The keys will light in red to indicate the muted state of the track. To unmute, repeat the button combo. The primary mode of the ASQ-1 is sequencer mode, designed for sequencing 2 independent synth voices via the CV gate output pairs. Let's patch the first CV gate pair to control a basic subtractive voice. When play and store are both disengaged, the keyboard can be used to play the voice live and test notes for the sequence. Once ready, press store to begin step input. As notes are entered, the total number of steps is shown on the keys. Up to 128 steps can be entered. When finished entering steps, press store again. When the clock is started, we can hear the basic sequence. Let's make something more interesting. Pressing store again with the playback stopped will clear the last sequence and prepare the sequencer for step input once more. This time we will enter notes with the keys and add holds and rests with the buttons. Tapping rest will add blank or rest steps between the notes. The keyboard octave can be changed with the octave buttons. Let's hold a note across 2 steps by holding the key and pressing the hold button. Finally, we can add a slide between 2 notes by holding the first note and pressing another. Let's end step input, ready playback and start the clock. We can modify or record a sequence live by pressing store during playback. Any key presses or rests will now be recorded live into the currently playing sequence. With store disengaged, holding the hold button displays the sequence length in pages of 8 steps on the octave lights. Pressing the octave button sets the length in pages of 8 steps. For non-8 step lengths, press a key for the last step instead of the octave button. Let's add 2 new pages for a total sequence length of 32 steps. Pressing Store again allows us to live record notes into the 2 new pages. Press Store once more when finished entering notes. In addition to the independent pattern lengths per track, each sequencer can also run its own division of the external clock. To set the division, hold the rest button and press one of the 5 black note keys. From left to right, the settings include ×1 followed by divisions of 2, 4, 8 and 16. During sequence playback, the current track can be transposed up by simply pressing a note key. To transpose both sequences and the quantizer together, hold Mode when performing a transposition. Pressing the lowest C key returns the sequence to its original root pitches. Finally, let's save our sequence to slot 1 by holding Store and pressing the first key. Now we're free to create a variation of the sequence. Let's save this sequence to slot 3. We can now recall either sequence by holding play and pressing the first or third key. Next is Quantiser Mode. The quantizer aligns any CV present at its input to the nearest note of the scale set on the keys. Here we've set up a falling saw wave on channel 3 of the PAM. Let's patch it to the quantizer CV input, then take the output to the volt per octave input of the MCO. Now we need to engage playback of the ASQ-1. Quantizer note changes only occur at each incoming clock pulse. Quantizing begins with the selection of any notes. Let's enable the remaining notes in the C major scale. As the CV descends, we can see its full octave span displayed on the octave lights. The currently quantized note is then displayed on the keys. Let's return to channel 3 of PAM and shape its wave to a rising saw. This causes the quantizer to produce ascending arpeggios. Note the movement across the lights has also changed direction. Just as with the sequencer, if we hold the rest button and press a black key, we will divide the quantizer's clock, causing note changes to occur less frequently. Finally, scales can be saved to memory by holding Store and pressing a note key. Let's enter a new scale and save it to the 3rd slot. Holding play and pressing a note key recalls saved scales from memory. The quantizer is capable of producing many interesting results, depending on the CV that's patched in. Let's change PAM's wave to random to jump around the scale. Lowering the level will reduce the octave range of the notes. The final mode is pattern. Pattern mode consists of 4 trigger outputs, each with its own drum machine style pattern sequencer. Let's patch each trigger out to a different drum sound on the squid sample. We'll press play and start the clock. The lights at the 8 white keys are used to display the current step location and the entered pattern. Let's enter some trigger steps by pressing the keys. Pattern length can be set independently for each trigger sequencer, with a maximum length of 64 steps. Just like the note sequencers, hold the hold button and press an octave button to change the length in increments of 8 steps. By default, page changes follow the sequence, allowing for rapid, real-time step editing. To disable this and edit one page at a time, simply choose a specific page with the octave buttons. Let's sequence the remaining sounds from the other 3 tracks. Remember, holding mode and pressing the octave keys allows us to navigate back and forth through the outputs. Just like the other modes, we can divide the clock of each trigger sequence independently by holding the rest button and pressing a black note key. Let's clear the kick pattern by reducing the sequence length below 8 steps. Pressing the store button during playback engages tap rhythm mode, where a pattern can be recorded live by tapping any of the note keys. Patterns can be created and edited using both methods for step entry. Let's lengthen the clap pattern and tap steps into the second page. Like the other modes, a sequencer's pattern can be saved to memory by holding store and pressing a key. The 4 trigger tracks share the same 13 memory slots, so patterns can be saved and loaded between them. Let's save the clap and kick patterns, then swap them by loading from the memory slots. Pattern loads occur on the next step following completion of the currently playing pattern. Let's quickly build up a track from scratch, making full use of the ASQ-1's outputs to sequence several voices and a drum beat simultaneously. With the clock stopped, let's enter in note, rest, hold and slide data for the first voice. Once the sequence has been entered, we can ready playback and start the clock to hear it. Now let's move to track 2, but this time play a sequence in live with the keys. First we'll set the sequence length to 16 steps and press store to enter notes in real time. Let's navigate to the trigger section to build up a drum pattern. Finally, let's trigger the taiko using the first trigger output, then control its pitch via the quantizer. The note keys set the scale of the pitch quantizer. Here, a triangle wave LFO from PAM is transformed into an arpeggiated sequence of notes by the quantizer. The simple tactile interface of the ASQ-1 makes it perfect for fast, on-the-fly jamming with an entire system. To conclude, let's look at a few patches. Here, the ASQ-1's two-note sequencers are controlling two voices patched from Akemi's castle. The four trigger sequence outputs are patched to 4 pip slopes that run on to control the levels of the castle's operators. As trigger patterns are entered, the two voices come alive, with the envelopes modulating their shared operators. The second pip slope reduces the level of both voices, producing a sidechain-like effect when it is triggered. Muting different trigger sequences disables the modulation and changes the timbre significantly. Going beyond standard drum sequencing, the trigger outs can be used to control many events or creative changes within a system. In this patch, a track has been created using the ASQ-1 sequencers to control drums and several voices from the squid sample. Using hold plus rest, we can unmute each output to perform the sequence. As mentioned earlier, the two-note sequencers and the quantizer can all be transposed together by holding mode and pressing any note key. Thanks for watching this overview of the brand new ASQ-1, a tactile, immediate and fun sequencer for jamming and performing live with your system. The ASQ-1 is available now and shipping from your preferred ALM stockist. As always, subscribe to stay up to date with new videos and product announcements. For more information on the ASQ-1 and the rest of the ALM product line, please visit busycircuits.com.